Claire Bishop was supposed to be dead. But that comes later. First, watch this. The diner in Hartsell knows her only as Callie, the quiet one, the new waitress with the scar along her jaw. A regular at the counter snaps his fingers without looking up. "Hey, waitress," he never once asks her name. She just refills the cup. Steady hand. Doesn't flinch. Doesn't say a word. The owner, Dale Prewitt, leans toward the new cook that morning. Says it plain, at the crowded counter, where anyone can hear. "Girls like her come and go. Don't bother learning her name." 12 customers are sitting there. 12, not one of them looks up. Then the bell over the door rings. A soldier steps in. He stops mid-step, goes white. He's staring at the woman this whole town already decided is no one. And his mouth moves. He shapes a name. But it isn't Callie. Cut. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have looked closer, this story is for you. Before we go on, do me a favor. Subscribe so the ending finds you. And in the comments, tell me the town you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Every city, every small town. Drop it below. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Claire Bishop was supposed to be dead. The government said so. It said so on paper, with a stamp and a date and a file number. And for 3 years and 4 months, nobody had told it otherwise. She hadn't always been Callie. That name was a coat she put on. Underneath it, she was Claire, and Claire had a life once, a real one. She coordinated records and aid at the United States consulate in Adharra, a small posting, a hot, dusty city most Americans couldn't find on a map. She was good at it. She was the one who found the missing form, the one who got a wheelchair through customs when a wounded contractor needed it. She kept the paperwork honest. She kept people from falling through the cracks. That's who she was. A woman whose whole job was making sure no one got lost in the machine. She was engaged, too, to a soldier named Owen Hale. Staff sergeant. Steady as a fence post and twice as stubborn. He'd chosen the ring the week before he shipped out. A small thing. Nothing fancy. A thin gold band with 3 words scratched inside it by hand. She used to run her thumb over those words when she couldn't sleep. She wore it on the day everything ended. The bombing came on a Tuesday. She doesn't remember the sound. That's the strange part. People think a blast is loud, and it is. But if you're close enough, it doesn't sound like anything at all. It just takes the room away. 1 second she was standing at the records counter. The next she was on the floor, and the ceiling was gone, and there was glass in her hair and a ringing where the world used to be. They pulled her out unconscious. Her face was cut open along the jaw. Her hands were burned. And somewhere in the rush of it, the ambulances, the screaming, the scramble to count the living and the dead, someone hung a tag on her. A tag with a name, spelled wrong. 1 letter off. Just 1. That's all it takes. By the time she woke up, 3 weeks later, in a hospital 2 countries away, the machine had already made up its mind. There'd been another woman in the records office that day. A colleague. A friend. And what was left of that friend had been mistagged with Claire's name. Confusion in the chaos. An honest, terrible mistake. The remains went home under Claire Bishop's name. They were buried under Claire Bishop's name. There's a stone in a national cemetery with her name carved into it, and it is not her under the grass. So the file said, killed. She tried to fix it. Of course she did. She was a records coordinator. Fixing files was the one thing in the world she knew how to do. But the machine that had erased her did not want to be told it was wrong. Every appeal went to an office in Washington. Every appeal came back the same. There was a name on that list, and to the man whose desk it landed on, a casualty affairs officer named Gerald Voss. That name was just ink. He never once pictured a person behind it. And then, 6 weeks after she woke, someone told her Owen was gone too. His convoy had been hit. they said. Wounded, missing then, the word settled into the harder one. She never saw a body. She never got the details. She just got the look on a chaplain's face, and that look told her enough. The man she was going to marry was dead, and she was dead, and the two of them were dead together in different countries. And there was nobody left who even knew to grieve them both. So Claire made a choice. She let the dead woman stay dead. She figured, what was left to come back to? Her fiancé was gone. Her face was ruined. Her own government had a headstone with her name on it, and wouldn't take it back. Fighting the machine had already eaten a year, and every dollar she had. And grief, real grief, makes you tired in a way sleep can't touch. She was so tired. She drifted. That's the honest word for it. She came back to the States quiet, on a passport that took 8 months to sort out, because the woman it belonged to was legally deceased. She moved from town to town, waited tables, cleaned rooms, kept her head down. She landed, finally, in Hartsell, Ohio, a speck of a place. One traffic light, a grain elevator, and a hardware store, and a diner called the Blue Awning that always needed hands because nobody stayed. And she kept the ring. She never wore it on her finger anymore. She kept it on a thin chain around her neck, tucked down under her collar, warm against her chest where nobody could see it. Some nights she still ran her thumb over the 3 scratched words. Then she'd tuck it away and go to sleep. That was Callie. That was who Hartsell got. Now here's the thing you need to understand about her before the town starts treating her like furniture. Because it matters. It's the whole reason this story is worth telling. Claire was kind. Not loud kind. Not the kind that wants a thank you. The quiet kind that just does the thing when nobody's looking. The busboy at the Blue Awning was a 17-year-old named Marcus with a sick mother and a habit of falling asleep on his feet by 9. More than once, Claire clocked his side of the work and never said so. She bussed her own tables and half of his and let him sit for 10 minutes in the back with his eyes closed. She never once brought it up. There was a trucker who came through in February. Snow on the highway. He'd busted a belt and had no cash till his company wired it Monday. And it was Friday night, and he sat in the corner booth trying to make one coffee last 4 hours because he was ashamed to say he was hungry. Claire brought him the meatloaf special. Told him the cook made too much and it'd only go in the trash. That was a lie. She paid for it herself out of tips she couldn't spare. Sat him near the heater and kept his coffee full and never let him feel like a charity case. She never complained. Not about the double shifts. Not about Dale docking her for breakages that weren't hers. Not about the regulars who looked straight through her like she was a window. The town loved her food and never learned her name. And she let them. That was the deal she'd made with herself. Small, quiet, invisible, safe. So by the time you're hating the people in this diner, and you will, I need you to already love her. Because she deserves so much better than what she got. And she got worse before she got anything at all. It started small. It always does. Dale Prewitt ran the Blue Awning the way a man runs a place he stopped caring about. He'd owned it 30 years. He'd stopped seeing it. To him, the transient staff were just parts. You put one in, it wore out. You put another in. He didn't dislike Claire. Disliking her would have meant noticing her. The schedule hung on a corkboard by the walk-in. Every week, Dale wrote the shifts out in pencil. Marcus, Tammy, the cook, Ray. And then, in the slot that should have said Callie, he wrote one word. Girl. Not even the wrong name. Just girl. Monday, girl. Wednesday, girl. Saturday, double. Girl she saw it the first week. She stood in front of that corkboard with a tray of dirty plates balanced on her hip, and she read the word girl 3 times where her name should have been. And something in her chest pulled tight. Then she loosened it. She'd gotten good at loosening it. She told herself it didn't matter. A name is just a sound. And besides, the name up there wasn't even her real one. What did she care if they got the fake one wrong too? but it stung. I want you to know it stung, even if she'd never say so. The regulars were worse and gentler all at once. They didn't mean cruelty. That's what made it land so hard. They just didn't see her. A man named Buddy Klein came in every morning at 6:40 for 2 eggs over easy and a side of dismissal. He'd talk right over her while she took his order. Keep telling his buddy about his knee, or the weather, or the ball game, and just hold up 2 fingers at her without a glance, and she was supposed to know. She always knew. She always got it right. He never noticed that either. There was a lawyer's secretary who called her Han in a voice you'd use on a dog. There was a table of high school boys who left a tip in pennies once as a joke and laughed about it, and she cleaned it up smiling. There was a woman from the church group who complained the coffee was cold, and when Claire brought a fresh pot, said finally to the ceiling instead of thank you to the person holding it. None of them knew her name. Most of them didn't know she had one. And here's where I have to tell you the things they didn't see. The things only you get to see. Because Callie the waitress and Claire the coordinator lived in the same body, and every so often the second one showed through the first. Little cracks in the coat. If any single soul in that diner had been paying attention, they'd have known something didn't add up. They weren't. But you are, so watch. One morning, Ray the cook dropped a full bus tub. Steel pans, the works. It hit the tile behind the pass like a bomb going off. Claire dropped. Not to the floor. Not quite. But her whole body flinched down and sideways, one hand flying up to cover her head, her back against the counter before she even knew she'd moved. For half a second, her face wasn't Callie's face. It was somewhere else. It was a Tuesday in a hot city with the ceiling coming down. Then it passed. She straightened up, laughed it off. Jumpy today, she said, and went back to her catch-ups. Buddy Klein, 6 feet away, didn't look up from his eggs. But you saw it. File it away. Another time, a slow Tuesday afternoon, an old man came in for pie. A veteran. You could tell by the cap. He had a stack of papers with him and a look on his face like a man drowning in slow motion. VA forms. Disability claim. He'd been fighting it 2 years, he told Ray, loud enough for the whole room, and they kept kicking it back, and he couldn't make heads or tails of what he'd done wrong. Claire brought his pie. Then she stopped. She looked at the top form, upside down, the way you'd glance at anything. Your dependency section, she said quietly. Line 11. You checked the box, but you didn't attach the schedule. That's why it's bouncing. And on the back, the effective date. You've got the date you filed, but they want the date of the diagnosis. Put the diagnosis date and staple the marriage certificate to the schedule, and it'll clear. The old man stared at her. So did Ray. Because a waitress in a nothing diner in a nothing town had just read a federal benefits form upside down and fixed in 15 seconds what 2 years of clerks couldn't. She said it the way you'd say the special. Easy, expert, like she'd filled out 10,000 of them. She had. In another life. Then she caught herself. Saw the old man's face. Saw Ray's. And she pulled the coat back on. My uncle had trouble with those, she said, which was a lie. And she picked up her tray and went back to the counter, and became Callie again. The old man's claim cleared 3 weeks later. He never knew who to thank. He thought it was luck. You know better. And the third crack. The one that mattered most. The one that told you exactly how deep this went. There was a newspaper, folded small and kept in her apron pocket, worn soft at the creases from being folded and unfolded 100 times. It wasn't today's paper. It was 3 years old. On a slow night, Claire would take it out in the back by the coat hooks and open it just part way. Not even all the way. Just enough to see the top of one column. It was the casualty notice. The anniversary of the bombing. There was a list of names, and near the bottom of that list, in small gray type, was her own. She never read the whole thing. She just held it. Every year on the same date, she held it a little longer. It was the only headstone she could visit, the only place her old name was allowed to exist. She'd fold it back up, tuck it away, wipe her eyes with the heel of her hand, and go carry 3 plates of eggs to men who'd never once asked her name. That was the shape of her days. Small dismissals and small tells, over and over, like a heartbeat. Snub, tell, and nobody in Hartsell heard either one. But the machine wasn't done with her. It never is. Because being erased isn't a thing that happens once and finishes. It's a thing that keeps costing you, month after month, quiet as rust. The scar along her jaw needed work. That's the plain fact of it. The blast had left it, and the field surgery that saved her had been fast and rough, and over 3 years, it had tightened and pulled in a way that hurt. Not vanity. It caught when she talked. It ached in the cold. A doctor in Columbus told her it could be fixed. Reconstructive work. Bring the tension down. Give her back the full motion of her own face. $18,600. She had it coming to her. That's what nobody in that diner would ever have guessed. Claire Bishop had earned benefits. Government service overseas. Injury in the line of duty. There was money set aside, by law, for exactly this. Medical coverage. A survivor's benefit. Back pay for 3 years of a salary that should have kept accruing, all of it frozen. Every cent. Locked behind a single stamped word. Deceased, you cannot draw benefits when you're dead. You cannot file a claim when you're dead. You cannot get $18,000 of surgery approved when the system that owes it to you insists, in writing, that you are in the ground in a national cemetery. She'd tried. God, she tried. She'd sat on hold for hours. She'd mailed certified letters to Gerald Voss's office in Washington and gotten back form replies that thanked her for her correspondence regarding the deceased. Regarding the deceased. That was her. She was the deceased, writing letters about herself and being thanked for her interest. And then, that spring, it stopped being a slow ache and became a knife. The letter came on a Thursday. Blue and white. From the property management company that owned the little apartment over the laundromat where she lived. Rent had gone up. She was behind. Not by much. By enough. The letter used a word she knew from the other side of a desk. The word she used to help people fight. Eviction, 21 days. Pay in full or vacate. And stapled behind it, a second page from a collections agency, because the hospital in Columbus had done a consult in imaging and wanted paying for it. And there was no insurance to bill, because there was no living person to insure. 21 days. 18,600 she couldn't touch. A wage that came in tips and quarters. And a legal death sitting on top of all of it like a stone on a chest. She sat on the edge of her bed that Thursday night, with both letters in her lap. She didn't cry. She was past the easy crying. She just sat there and did the math over and over, and the math kept coming out the same. There was no version of it that worked. Not on a waitress's pay. Not in 21 days. Not while she was dead. She lifted the chain out from under her collar, held the ring in the lamplight, ran her thumb over the 3 scratched words the way she had 10,000 times, and she thought about the man who'd scratched them. 3 years gone, and how tired she was of carrying 2 dead people around her neck. Tuck it away, go to sleep, get up, carry the eggs. That was still the plan. Even then. And then the town did the thing that broke it. The Blue Awning was going to host a fundraiser. That was the buzz all week. A veterans benefit night. There was a soldier coming through, a decorated one, home from overseas, part of some tour the county was doing to raise money for returning servicemen. Hartsell was going to turn out. There'd be a flag on the wall and a donation jar on the counter and a speech. The whole town, packed into one little diner, standing up to honor a man who'd nearly died for the flag. Claire, chopping onions in the back, felt something she couldn't name. She'd nearly died for that flag, too. There was a stone with her name on it in a field of white markers. She'd bled on the same ground. But nobody in Hartsell knew that, and nobody ever would, and so on the night the town stood up to clap for a hero, she'd be one more pair of hands carrying plates. She could live with that. She'd made her peace with invisible. But Dale had other ideas. He found her the afternoon of the fundraiser, wiping down the pass. He didn't quite look at her. He never quite did. "Big night," he said. "Whole town's coming. Press might even come." He worked a toothpick over. "I want it looking sharp out front. Tammy'll wait the floor. Ray on the line." A pause. He glanced at her jaw, at the scar. Just for a second. Then away. "You stay in the back tonight. Plating and dishes. Don't come out front." Claire went still. "You're short-handed for a full house. You'll need the floor. Tammy can handle it." He turned to go. Then he said the thing. He said it not even to be cruel, which was worse. He said it the way you'd move a chair. "Look, it's a nice crowd. Cameras and all. I don't want," he gestured vaguely at his own jaw at hers, "I don't want anything putting customers off their food. You understand. Stay in the back. There's a good girl." And he walked away. There's a good girl. Claire stood at the pass with the rag in her hand and let it land. All of it. The scar he couldn't look at. The name he never learned. The face he wanted hidden so the town could enjoy its dinner. On the one night in 3 years the flag was going up on that wall, she was being told to hide the wound she'd gotten under it. She didn't argue. What was there to argue? She just nodded, once, and turned back to the sink. That night the Blue Awning filled up like it never had. Every stool, every booth, folding chairs down the middle. The flag went up over the pie case. The donation jar filled with bills. Somebody strung red, white, and blue bunting along the front windows. There was a hero at the head table, in dress uniform, and the town leaned in to shake his hand and thank him, and buy him coffee he'd never have to pay for. And behind the pass, in the back, unseen, a woman who'd nearly died for the same flag plated their patriotism onto white ceramic and slid it through the window and washed their dishes when they were done. When the room stood up to applaud, and it did, twice, she stood at the sink with her hands in gray water and listened to the clapping come through the wall. That's the bottom of it. Right there. That's the lowest this gets. A hero honored out front. A hero hidden in back. And the whole town too busy celebrating one to see the other, 6 feet away, through a swinging door. If you had to look away for a second there, I understand. Stay with me. Because this is where it turns. Something changed in Claire that night. Not loud. Nothing about her was ever loud. But standing at that sink, listening to a town clap for a courage they'd made her hide, the tired thing in her finally cracked, and underneath the tired thing was something else. Something she'd buried 3 years ago, along with her own name. Anger. And under the anger, worse. The thought that maybe she'd been wrong to let herself stay dead. She'd told herself she stayed dead because there was nothing to come back to. Owen gone. Her face ruined. Nobody waiting. But that wasn't the whole truth, was it? She'd stayed dead because coming back meant fighting. And she'd been too broken to fight. And it was easier to be no one than to be a woman battling a machine that had already won. Easier. But look where easy had gotten her. A word on a schedule. $18,000 she couldn't touch. 21 days to nowhere. Hiding in a back room while the flag went up without her. She dried her hands. She went home when the last dish was done, long after the crowd had gone. And she did the thing she hadn't done in 3 years. She took out the letter. Not the newspaper. The other one. Owen's last letter. She kept it in a coffee tin on the top shelf, wrapped in the same cloth as the ring when the ring wasn't on her neck. She hadn't opened it since the day the chaplain gave her that look. She couldn't. It was the last of his voice she had, and she'd been rationing it, terrified of a day when she'd have read it so many times it stopped sounding like him. She sat at her little kitchen table and unfolded it under the lamp. His handwriting, bad as ever. He wrote the way he talked, plain, stubborn, no wasted words. He wrote about coming home. He wrote about the ring, and the 3 words in it, and how he'd meant every one. He wrote, near the end, a line she'd read 100 times in her head over 3 years without letting her eyes touch the paper. Whatever happens over here, you don't disappear on me. You hear? You're Claire Bishop. Don't you ever let anybody make you smaller than that. I'll find you. I always find you. She read it. Then she read it again. And this time the tears came, but they weren't the tired kind. They were the other kind. The kind that clears the glass. Don't you ever let anybody make you smaller than that. She'd let them, though. She'd let Dale make her a girl on a schedule. She'd let a whole town make her a pair of hands. She'd let a man in Washington make her a name on a list of the dead. She'd spent 3 years being made smaller and smaller, and she'd called it survival. But Owen would have called it something else. He'd have called it giving up. Claire lifted the ring off her neck and set it on the table beside the letter. In the lamplight, the 3 scratched words caught and held. She looked at them a long time. Then she made a decision. The first real one in 3 years. She was going to reclaim her name. Legally, on paper. For real. She was going to march into the machine that had buried her and make it dig her back up. And she was going to get the surgery she was owed, and the back pay she'd earned, and she was going to stop hiding her own face in a back room. She was Claire Bishop. She'd been Claire Bishop the whole time, under the coat, and she was done pretending otherwise. She knew what it would take. She knew it better than anyone, because she used to be the person on the other side of that counter. To reverse a death declaration, you needed identity. Proof. Somebody who could stand up and say, under their authority, that the person in front of them was the person the file said was dead. Records could be forged. Faces changed, especially a face rebuilt by a field surgeon. What the machine trusted was a witness, a qualified one, someone with standing. And that was the problem. That was the wall she kept hitting at 2 a.m. The people who'd known Claire Bishop were scattered or gone. The consulate was a crater. Her family was small and distant and had grieved her and moved through it. And the one man who'd have crossed an ocean to say her name out loud, the one man whose word she'd have staked her life on, Owen was dead too. So she'd have to do it alone. Fight the machine with nothing but a misspelled tag and a burned-out records office and her own 2 hands. She'd done impossible paperwork before. She'd have to do it again, for herself this time, and she'd have to do it in 21 days. And the odds were bad, and she knew exactly how bad because she used to quote those odds to other people across a counter. But she was going to try. That was the decision. She folded the letter. She put the ring back on. She went to sleep, for the first time in 3 years, with a plan instead of a stone on her chest. The fundraiser wasn't over, though. That was the thing she didn't know. The county's tour had one more stop in Hartsell. The visiting soldier had a formal send-off the next evening, back at the Blue Awning. One more crowd, one more speech. And a decorated soldier of that rank didn't travel alone. He had an escort. A staff sergeant assigned to run the detail, keep the schedule, get the man from town to town. Claire didn't know his name. Nobody had told her. Why would they? She was in the back. So she almost missed it entirely. The next evening, the diner filled again. Bunting still up in the windows. Flags still over the pie case. Dale had her on plating again. Stay in the back, there's a good girl. But the crowd was even bigger than the night before. And by 7, Tammy was drowning, 3 tables deep and dropping orders. And Ray was hollering that plates were dying in the window. Dale, sweating, cornered. He looked at the chaos on the floor. He looked at the back. And for once in his life, he made the practical call over the cruel one. Callie, floor, now, take the counter. He didn't even look at her when he said it. Just keep your head down. So she came out. First time in 2 nights. Apron on, order pad up, the ring warm and hidden under her collar, and a whole new spine underneath the coat. She took the counter. She poured the coffee. She was quick and quiet and good at it, the way she was good at everything nobody thanked her for. A man had just sat down at the far end of the counter, come in with the crowd, alone, in fatigues, cap off, weary in the shoulders the way soldiers get. The escort. The staff sergeant running the visiting heroes detail. He'd taken the last stool, out of the way a man does when he's spent his whole day making room for someone more important. He was rubbing his eyes with 2 fingers. He hadn't looked up. He just wanted coffee in 30 seconds where nobody needed anything from him. Claire didn't look at his face. She wasn't looking at faces. She was working. She grabbed a clean cup, filled it from the fresh pot, and carried it down the counter to the tired man on the end stool and set it in front of him with a steady hand. "Coffee's fresh," she said. Same as she'd said it 10,000 times. And the man on the stool went still. The kind of still that's louder than a shout. The kind of still where a body forgets it's supposed to breathe. His 2 fingers came down off his eyes. Slow, and he looked up at the waitress who just set down his coffee. Looked up at the scar along her jaw and the plain, steady face and the dark hair pulled back. At a woman this whole town had already decided was no one. And every drop of color left his face. Because Staff Sergeant Owen Hale was not dead. They'd told her he was. They'd been wrong about that, too. The machine had gotten him just as wrong as it had gotten her. And for 3 years and 4 months, each of them had been grieving a ghost the other one was still living inside of. He'd come home to a stone with her name on it. He'd stood over her grave. He'd said goodbye to a woman who was, at that exact moment, 3 states away, carrying eggs to men who never asked her name. And now he was sitting on a stool in Hartsell, Ohio, staring up at her. His hands started to shake around the cup. His mouth opened. His eyes were moving over her face, like a man reading a letter he'd already burned, checking it against the one thing in the world he was sure he'd lost. The scar. The jaw. The eyes. The eyes he'd chosen a ring for, the week before he shipped out. And Claire, Callie, the waitress who was already turning away to grab the next check, felt it. The stillness, the weight of being looked at, really looked at, for the first time in 3 years. She turned back, half a question already on her face, ready to ask if he needed anything else. And Owen Hale, white as the flag on the wall, his voice not even a whisper, shaped a name across the counter that was not Callie. "He said, Claire?" She didn't answer him. Not right away. A name is a heavy thing when you've spent 3 years and 4 months setting it down. She'd folded it up small. She'd packed it in a coffee tin on a top shelf and told herself it belonged to a dead woman. And here was a dead man saying it back to her. Soft. Across a counter. In a diner in Ohio. So she did the only thing her hands still knew how to do. She smiled the waitress smile. The one that meant nothing. The one she gave Buddy Klein every morning at 6:40 when he didn't look up. "It's Callie," she said. "You want cream with that?" And she watched him break a little. Watched the certainty in his face waver. Because that's what the machine does. It doesn't just kill you. It makes the people who loved you doubt their own eyes. Owen Hale had stood over a stone with her name on it. He had felt the cold of it under his hand. And a stone is a hard thing to argue with. Harder than a living face. He'd trained himself for 3 years to know she was gone. And here that training was, fighting the truth right in front of him. His jaw worked. He looked down at the coffee. Then back up. "I'm sorry," he said. You look like someone." "I get that a lot," she said. It was a lie. And it wasn't. Nobody in Hartsell had ever thought she looked like anyone. That was the point of her. She was the woman you didn't look at twice. She refilled the sugar and moved down the counter, and her heart was going like a hammer under the apron, under the chain, under the thin gold band with 3 words scratched inside it that was pressed flat and warm against her breastbone. Owen Hale did not drink his coffee. He sat with it going cold between his hands, and he watched her work. He watched the way she carried 4 plates on one arm, the way she cut a slice of pie without measuring, the way she flinched, just a flicker, just a hitch in the shoulders, when Ray dropped a sheet pan back in the kitchen and it rang out like a shot. A civilian doesn't flinch like that. A woman who's only ever waited tables doesn't fold in at the sound of metal hitting the floor like she's waiting for the ceiling to come down. He'd seen that flinch in 100 men. He had it himself. That's the first cycle. He lingered. He tested. And she gave him Callie and kept her back turned, because she loved him too much to hand him a ghost. There was a photograph on the fundraiser table by the door. The visiting soldier, the decorated one, and his detail around him, and in the picture a young woman stood at Owen's shoulder with her hand on his arm. Fair hair. Easy smile. Claire saw it when she cleared the end of the counter, and her stomach dropped the way a floor drops out from under you. He's married, she thought. Of course he is. He grieved you, and he buried you, and he built a life. And look, there she is, right there with her hand on him. And a strange, aching relief moved through her. Because if he'd moved on, if he was whole, if he was happy, then she didn't have to do the one thing she was most afraid of. She didn't have to walk into his life like a bomb and blow the peace out of it. She could stay Callie. She could let him keep his stone. She could love him from behind the pass, invisible, the way she'd loved everyone in this town. And she could get on the bus in 21 days and take her ruin somewhere he'd never have to see it. She didn't know the woman in the photograph was his sister. The machine had lied to her one more time, and this time it used her own eyes to do it. That was the near discovery, and the relief. She let herself believe a thing that hurt just enough to be easy. Owen went back to the motel that night and did not sleep. He lay in the dark and he ran the tape. The scar, the eyes, the flinch, the way she'd said Callie a half second too fast. And around 3 in the morning he did the thing a soldier does when he can't trust his own eyes anymore. He picked up the phone and he called someone whose eyes he did trust. Colonel Ann Whitfield had been his commanding officer for 6 years. She was the one who'd handed him the flag. She was the one who'd read him the casualty report in a hospital corridor in Landstuhl Bishop. Claire M., killed in the consulate action at Adharra, and watched a good soldier come apart at the seams. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Hale, it's 0300. I need you to pull a record," he said. "Bishop, Claire, the Adharra file. All of it." A long silence on the line. "Owen, I saw her, ma'am." "Owen, we buried her. We buried a stone," he said. "Pull the file." Whitfield was a woman who trusted paper. 30 years in, and paper had never once lied to her that she knew of. She trusted the record the way Dale Prewitt trusted a schedule with the word girl written on it. But she also knew Owen Hale wasn't a man who saw ghosts. So in the morning she pulled the file, and she read it, and the paper said what it had always said. Killed in action. Remains recovered. Case closed. Signed off by a casualty affairs officer in Washington named Gerald Voss. "It's closed, Owen," she told him. "I'm sorry. It's Kia and it's closed. Whoever you saw, it isn't her. You need to let this one lie. That's the second cycle." He reached for the truth, and the machine handed him a closed file and told him to go home. But Owen Hale had chosen a ring for those eyes the week before he shipped out. And a man doesn't forget the eyes he was going to spend his life looking at. He went back to the Blue Awning the next morning at 6:40. Buddy Klein was already there. So was Owen, on the end stool, nursing a coffee he didn't drink, watching a waitress the whole town called Callie move through her shift like a woman trying not to be seen. The bill came in the mail on a Tuesday. She read it on the edge of her bed, the way she read all of them, with the lamp on and her boots still laced. $18,600. Reconstructive surgery on a jaw the blast had opened, done in the weeks after she woke. Billed to a woman the government said was dead. You can't bill the dead. But you can bill Callie, and Callie's insurance didn't exist. Because Callie didn't exist, and Claire was a headstone in Arlington. Under it, in an eviction letter creased soft from handling. The collections agency had drawn its line. 21 days. She'd counted them down to the ones that were left. She took the coffee tin down from the top shelf. She hadn't opened it in a year. Inside, wrapped in a square of cloth, was Owen's last letter. The paper had gone soft as skin from all the time she'd read it, and stopped reading it. She didn't open it now. She just held it. And she lifted the chain over her head and let the ring lie in her palm, the thin gold band, and she turned it so the lamp caught the 3 words scratched inside by a jeweler in a town neither of them would ever see again. She had a choice to make, and only 2 ways to make it. She could walk into that diner and tell Owen Hale the truth, hand him back the woman he'd buried, and watch it wreck whatever peace he'd built with the fair-haired girl in the photograph. Or she could get on the bus. She decided to get on the bus, because that's what the underestimated learn to do. They learn to make themselves small enough to fit through the exit without anyone having to notice they were ever in the room. She started to pack. But the ring had one more thing to say. It happened at the counter, the next afternoon, and it happened the way the important things always happen, in the middle of something ordinary. She reached across to set down Owen's plate, eggs he wouldn't eat, and the collar of her shirt fell open, and the chain slipped, and the ring swung out into the light between them and hung there. Turning, Owen Hale stopped breathing for the second time in a week. He knew that ring. He'd held it in a jeweler's back room with his hands shaking. He'd paid it off in 3 deployments worth of hazard pay. He'd chosen the band, and he'd chosen the 3 words, and he'd watched a man with a loop scratch them into the gold. Faster. Always. Home. The joke that wasn't a joke. The promise that he'd come back quick, and she'd be the place he came back to. She saw him see it. She grabbed the ring and tucked it away, too fast, and her face went white, and she turned for the kitchen. "Wait," he said. She didn't wait. Claire, she was already through the swinging door. He didn't chase her. Not yet. Because a soldier who's been told to let it lie needs more than a ring. He needs the mechanism. He needs to understand how a living woman becomes a name on a stone. Or he'll spend the rest of his life wondering if grief just made him crazy at last. So, he made one more call, and this time, he didn't ask Whitfield to trust him. He asked her to go back into the Adharra file and read it the way you read a thing that's lying to you. And Colonel Ann Whitfield, who trusted paper, did something she'd never done in 30 years. She stopped trusting it. She pulled the evacuation manifest from the night of the bombing. And there it was, the crack in the whole edifice, small as a misspelled name. The unconscious woman evacuated under a tag that read Bishop. C, a clerk's slip in the dark. 1 letter. The difference between a life and a grave. And the remains recovered from the consulate, the ones the file said, were Claire Bishop, tagged in the chaos by a second clerk off the same duty roster, off the same misspelling. A colleague, another woman, misnamed into Claire's coffin. 2 clerks, 1 bad night, 1 dropped letter. That's all it takes. The machine doesn't need malice. It just needs a dark room and a fast pen and nobody, for 3 years and 4 months, willing to look twice. Whitfield sat with that manifest a long time. Then, she called Gerald Voss's office in Washington. Voss was a careful man. He'd handled Claire's appeals, the ones she'd sent in the first year, before she gave up, the letters that came back stamped and unmoved. To Voss, Bishop, Claire M., was a closed case in a drawer of closed cases, and closed was the only word in his vocabulary that mattered. He told Colonel Whitfield the file was adjudicated. He told her death declarations aren't reversed on the say-so of a soldier who thinks he saw a face. He told her there were procedures. Then, start them, Whitfield said. Because I'm holding a manifest with the wrong name on it, and you're going to want to be on the right side of this when it comes apart. Meanwhile, in Hartsell, the 21 days ran out. Eviction day. She'd known it was coming the way you know a season's turning. Her rooms were bare. The coffee tin was packed. The letter and the ring were in her coat, over her heart, where they'd always been. She'd bought a bus ticket with the last of her tips, the same tip she'd once spent on a stranded trucker's supper back in February. A man with no cash and a long way to go. Because that was who she was, even when she had nothing. Feeding the stranded out of a pocket that couldn't afford it. She tied her apron on for one last shift. She'd finish the day. She'd never once left Dale short. Then she'd walk to the depot and be gone before anyone learned her name. The fundraiser bunting was still up outside the Blue Awning. Red, white, and blue, faded already in the sun. The town had had its hero night. The donation jar was still on the counter, half full, and the light was going golden long the way it does in Ohio in the late afternoon, honey through the front glass, catching the chrome and the pie case and the dust. Owen Hale walked in at 6. He didn't sit down. He stood in the middle of the floor, and Dale Prewitt looked up from the register and started to say something about tables, and Owen didn't hear him. He was looking at the woman by the pass with her coat already on under her apron and her eyes already gone somewhere far away. "Claire Bishop," he said, out loud, in the middle of the room. Not a whisper this time. A soldier's voice, pitched to Callie, the voice that had called cadence and read names off memorials. The diner went quiet. Buddy Klein set his cup down. Tammy stopped mid-pour. Ray came to the pass with a spatula still in his hand. Marcus, the busboy, 17 and skinny, froze with a tub of dishes on his hip. 12 people, maybe more, and every one of them looking now. Looking at the waitress they'd never bothered to look at. Because a man in a uniform had just said a name that wasn't Callie, and said it like it was the most important word he owned. She stopped. She turned around. And Owen Hale crossed the floor and pulled his dog tags out from under his collar and held them up in the gold light. His tags. But he turned them, and there was a second set threaded on the same chain, worn thin, and he held those out to her. A set stamped Bishop, Claire M. The tags they'd have buried with a stone. The tags he'd carried against his own chest for 3 years and 4 months, because he couldn't put her in the ground without keeping something of her on him. And Claire Bishop reached up with a hand that finally wasn't steady, and she lifted the chain over her head, and she let the ring come out into the same light. They hung there together, the tags with her name, the ring with his 3 words, turning slow in the honey light through the front glass, matched, the way they were always supposed to be matched, in front of the whole town that had decided she was no one. Nobody said anything. There was nothing in the room but the tick of the pie case cooler and the sound of a man and a woman breathing like they'd both just come up from underwater. Then Claire turned to Dale Prewitt. 30 years he'd owned this diner. 30 years he'd called the help girl and written it on the schedule to save the ink of a name. He'd hidden her in the back on the hero night so her scar wouldn't put the customers off. He stood there now with his dish towel in his 2 hands, and his mouth opened and shut, and no words came. "You didn't need to know my name to be kind," Claire said. Quiet, no heat in it. That was the worst of it. For Dale, there was no heat in it at all. You just chose not to. And Dale Prewitt looked down at the dish towel like it might tell him what to do. And it didn't. And he couldn't look up again. The phone on the wall rang. It was Ray, closest to it, who answered. And it was Ray who held the receiver out into the silent room and said, "Ma'am, it's for you. A colonel." They put it on the speaker of the little radio phone by the register. Because a room that's just watched a dead woman come back to life will not settle for hearing one side. And Colonel Ann Whitfield's voice came into the Blue Awning, tinny and certain, reading from a document she'd forced out of a careful man in Washington that afternoon. Reading from the corrected casualty determination, Department of State, case of Bishop, Claire M. A pause, paper turning. Prior determination, killed in action, Adharra consulate, entered in error. Cause of error, misidentification of remains, and a misfiled evacuation record. Subject was evacuated alive and is hereby. And here the colonel's steady voice caught, just for a second, 30 years, and it caught, is hereby determined to be living. Death declaration rescinded. All associated benefits, coverage, and back pay to be restored effective the original date of injury. Presumed killed. In error. The whole diner heard it. Buddy Klein, who'd never once in 3 years asked her name, heard it. Tammy heard it. Marcus heard it. The busboy with the sick mother, and something moved in his young face that looked like it might follow him a long while. The understanding that the woman who'd quietly covered his shifts so he could see his mom was somebody the government owed a debt it could never fully pay. And the $18,600, the bill she'd read on the edge of her bed with her boots still laced, dissolved into the sum of what they'd owed her all along. Back pay for 3 years and 4 months of a life the machine had stolen. Coverage for a jaw the blast had opened. Not charity, not a jar on a counter. The thing she'd earned and been denied because a clerk dropped a letter in the dark. But she wasn't looking at the phone. She was looking at Owen. And there was one thing left she didn't understand. "They told me," she said. Her voice was very small in the quiet room. "Weeks after. They told me your convoy was hit. They told me you were gone. I grieved you, Owen. I let myself stay dead because there was nothing left to come back to." And Owen Hale's face came apart, finally, all the way. 3 years of it. "They told me the same," he said. "Wounded, missing, then killed. Bishop, Claire, killed at Adharra. I stood over your stone." He laughed, and it was a terrible wet sound, the laugh of a man who's just understood the size of the thing that was done to them. "We've been grieving each other, the both of us, all this time. Each of us standing at the other one's grave. The machine hadn't just killed her. It had killed him to her, and her to him. And let each of them spend 3 years and 4 months mourning a ghost that was, that whole time, still breathing 3 states away, or a continent away, close enough to touch if either of them had known which stone to stop believing." "The girl in the photograph," Claire said. "By the door. On your arm." "My sister," Owen said. "She came out to see the soldier honored. She's the only family I've got left, Claire. She's the only thing I didn't bury." His sister. Not a wife. Not a life he'd built over her grave. Just a sister, holding up the arm of a brother who'd closed himself off so hard he'd nearly failed to trust his own eyes when the dead came back and set down his coffee. Claire Bishop put her hand over her mouth. And then she wasn't standing behind the pass anymore. She'd crossed the floor she'd waded across 10,000 times, and Owen Hale had her. Both arms, the tags and the ring pressed between them, and the whole diner looked away and looked back, and some of them, the hard old regulars, were wiping at their eyes with the heels of their hands and pretending it was the light. Buddy Klein stood up from his stool. 6'40" man, 30 years of not looking up. He took his hat off. He didn't say anything. He just held his hat over his chest, the way you do. And that was Buddy Klein's whole apology, and it was more than he'd ever given anyone. Dale Prewitt never did find his words that day. He hung the dish towel on its hook, and he went into the back, and he stayed there a long time. The bus left the Hartsell depot at 7 without her. Months later. The Blue Awning in the morning takes the light the way it always has. Honey through the front glass. Warm on the formica. Chrome toaster throwing a little sun across the counter. The bunting's long gone. But there's a small brass plate by the register now, and it isn't hard to read if you lean in. It says the diner's proud to have served Claire Bishop. And up on the schedule, in the box where a man once wrote girl to save himself the trouble, there's a name, written out full, in Dale Prewitt's own careful hand. He writes it out full every week now. He's never once gone back to the other word. It's the only kind of sorry a man like that knows how to say. And he says it every Sunday when he makes the schedule, one name at a time, spelled right. Claire doesn't work the floor anymore. She keeps a desk in town, 2 doors down from the 5 and dime, and on the glass it says Veterans Records Assistance, and inside it she does the thing she was always good at, the thing the consulate trained her for before the machine tried to erase that too. She finds the men and women the paper got wrong. She fixes the VA claims that stall for 2 years for no reason anyone can name. She'd done it once, quietly, for a stranger who came in for pie, back when she was still Callie and still afraid, fixed his frozen disability claim in the time it took his coffee to cool, and 3 weeks later it cleared, and he never knew it was her. Now she does it out loud, with her real name on the door, and there's a passport in her drawer. 8 months old, the first piece of paper in 3 years that agrees she's alive. She married Owen. Simply. No fuss. The ring's on her hand now. In the open. In the light. Where the whole town can see it. And it doesn't turn slow on a chain under her collar anymore. It just sits there on her finger like the ordinary miracle it is. Faster. Always. Home. He came back quick, in the end. It only took a coffee. Set down with steady hands. 3 states from anywhere either of them meant to be. There's a letter she keeps in the drawer of the desk, under the passport. It came from Washington, from Gerald Voss's office, a corrected determination on heavy paper. An apology of the kind institutions write, which is to say no apology at all. Just the facts set right at last. She never framed it. A thing like that doesn't go on a wall. But she didn't throw it out either. Some mornings she takes it out and reads it and puts it back. And that's enough. The machine wrote her name wrong for 3 years and 4 months. She likes having the page where it finally wrote it right. A man came in the diner the other day, new to town, and he sat at the counter, and Tammy was busy, so Claire, who'd stopped in for her own coffee, slid him a menu out of old habit. "Morning," he said. "What's your name?" He asked it first. Before anything else. Before the coffee, before the eggs, before he'd decided a single thing about her. And Claire Bishop looked at him a moment, this stranger who'd done the simplest thing in the world, the thing a whole town full of people had chosen for 3 years not to do. "Claire," she said, and she smiled. Because here's the thing the world keeps getting wrong, and keeps getting wrong, and will probably go on getting wrong. The quiet ones. The ones you take for furniture. The waitress who refills your cup and never asks for thanks. The one you talk right over. The one whose name you can't be bothered to learn. Sometimes she's exactly what she looks like. And sometimes she's a woman who nearly died for the same flag you clapped for on Hero Night, kept alive behind the past by a dropped letter in a closed file, owed everything, given nothing. Waiting for one person in the whole world to look twice. Look twice. That's all it ever costs. And if you've got a Claire in your own town, someone you passed 100 times and never once saw, tell me where you're watching from. Comment your city. I want to see how far this one travels.